Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday night Community Connections. It's so lovely to be with you all. And tonight we have a very special guest, Phae from the Tiny Homes Expo. I can't wait to introduce you. But before I do, I just want to give you some announcements, what's happening around Australia. We have on the 8th of August, WA is kicking off with their inaugural hub welcome party, I suppose, launching. And so jump onto the website or contact Chris or Joyce for details. There's two um, hub meetings at the same time, one on the north side of the river, one on the south side. So, and then they're going to zoom in so everyone can meet each other. And then on the 15th of August, anyone around the Blue Mountains area, if you want to go learn how to make butter and ghee from scratch, then go along to that register. There is a cost. It's $30 for members and $40 for non-members. So make sure you register so you know what to bring and all the details. Then we have also on the 8th of August, I'm backtracking now, the Hills Hub are doing a get together learning about technology. So Zach Joseph is going along to that, well versed in the area of technology and safety. So much to know and so much to be aware of. So go along to that one if you're around the Hills area. Then we're very excited for our Tiny Homes event in Brisbane from the 28th to the 30th of August. That is why we have Phae here tonight. We want to find out a little bit more about what the Tiny Homes Expo is all about, but also if you're interested in being in a tiny home yourself one day, what that looks like, and everything you need to know to get prepared for that. And also, we're going to just share with you what we are doing at the Tiny Homes. Very, very excited. So let me just bring on our beautiful Phae. And Phae and I contacted Phae earlier this year when I was looking to go to Queensland to do an expo. And it worked out that rather than putting on a My Self-Reliance summit like we usually do, it was just going to be a much smarter idea to jump on and collaborate with Phae and the Tiny Homes to bring what we do to tiny homes. So our vendors and our store holders and our speakers and Phae graciously welcomed us as part of the crew. And so we have done a Tiny Homes in Sydney expo already, and that was so much fun. So welcome, Phae. Good to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Phae, can you just give us a little bit of background? I know you started Tiny Homes Expo in 2021. Why did you start that?
I think initially I was just always interested in housing of all sorts, to be honest with you. But there was a stage about 2014, I think, when I first ever saw a tiny house and didn't think too much of it. And then fast forward, I'm working for a an event company, and I came up with the idea of like people would like to learn more about tiny homes and off-grid living and things like that. And it was about, 2020, COVID was in, if you remember, and, people were thinking differently. And I spoke to my partner, and he owned a company called Big Boys Toys Expo.com. Like it's an event, an event company that he does. And I kind of discussed it with him. And originally he actually said to me very condescendingly, might I add, oh, I'll help you out if you want to do a little hippie show. That's what he called it. And it was everything but a little hippie show. It actually took off, probably more so than either of us, thought to begin with. We thought it would be quite a small show, but I think the rise of tiny houses came about the same time, and it got a lot of momentum especially with the expos. So we kind of went all out and rolled out right across the country really quickly, which we may not have done, if it hadn't been taken to with such enthusiasm. And so that was kind of how we got it started. Um, and I just think that it's all about, really the timing of it. I think it's become more and more popular. I remember thinking to myself, oh, tiny homes might be a bit of a fad. I thought that for a little while. But it didn't take long for me to realize that there's no fad here. This is a really viable housing form, and people, there was always a fantastic tiny home movement. But what's happened, definitely over the last 5 years is that we've seen a huge mainstream influx of people that are interested in tiny houses. So it's really broadened the audience, which, it's actually quite a good thing because it's certainly come to the attention of legislators and stuff that are going to have to pay attention and look at tiny houses as a different housing typology, and sort out some sort of pathway to make them easier to live in, especially long term living in them. In the past, short-term living and Airbnb and things like that has been more acceptable than living in them, which in the current housing environment is insane.
Have you had much pushback then from legislation and council and things to accepting them?
It's not so much that there's a pushback. It's more of a case of, they're behind and they were surprised. So suddenly all these people, are going, are phoning them and asking about tiny houses. A lot of people think that councils won't allow tiny houses. Councils don't like tiny houses. Government don't like tiny houses. It's not exactly the case. The case is that they don't have an assessment pathway for a tiny house. We don't fit in any of the boxes, and so we swim about in this grey area. Which, to be honest with you, if you look at the movement, the original grassroots movement of the tiny house movement, that was deliberate. They were put on wheels to get around legislation. Quite frankly, let's not beat around the bush. That's what's few people bought a tiny house with the idea of roaming and being nomadic. We already have something for that. It's called a caravan. Tiny houses were put on wheels to try and circumvent planning legislation, which was all great when it was the movement, but now you have this mainstream uprise. People are demanding that there is some sort of assessment pathway because people are used to having to go through council and ask permission for things, unfortunately.
Mm. So, and you have your speakers who come and speak about that at the Tiny Homes event. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, we felt it was it was always a big burning question. And originally, I'm just the event organizer, but almost by default, because I'm at the expos and I'm meeting people who are buying them, I'm meeting builders who are building them, I'm meeting advocates who are advocating for them. And I have a platform that brings all those people to one place. It puts me in a really privileged situation. I quickly realized that the information that I was garnering through doing the expos on a regular basis and having so many people come through the doors, that I was in a really good place to start advocating myself. And so definitely the last 3 years, I've been heavily involved in advocating for tiny houses from council level to state level and also federal level. It's not something that comes naturally to me, but I've certainly have been able to get a lot of attention for tiny houses. So a really good example was a Zoom call that I had just yesterday morning with a newly elected I can't say the word, legislation director of Tasmania. Tasmania is a very difficult place to have a tiny house in. And she has reached out to me and asked me for a Zoom call, and she's really, really positive about changing legislation there. And a call with me means that you can very quickly find out a lot of data that governments don't have, that I've basically have picked up from doing the expo. So the expo serves quite a great purpose as far as that side of things go. It's not necessarily me having the knowledge, it's just me being in that situation where I'm just 24/7 in the hub of it. There is, by the way, a association, the Tiny House Association, and officially they do this kind of work. Like I say, my default position is literally because I have a lot of information around what is needed. And so I happily give that information around as much as possible. And, a lot of it has really positive effects.
So, how much have you seen the shift then of people moving into tiny homes and a lot of builders, aren't there? There's a lot of builders building tiny homes and dedicating specifically to that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, I can give you some context. When I first come up with that idea and pitched it to Lance, as I told the story earlier, I think I was able to find a potential of maybe 39 exhibitors across the whole of Australia. As we stand today, there's over 300 tiny home builders in Australia. And I'm just talking about Australian tiny home builders, not importers. If we add the importers and all the modular builders as well, it would go into thousands very quickly. But the tiny home industry has has evolved, as has the marketplace. So I think initially it was very much, I would say, there was quite a demand for tiny houses from 50 plus single women. There you go. That'd be pretty much, in a nutshell, what the demographic was. But as we go forward, that demographic is expanding, and we're finding that where it's expanding is into families. And for that reason, you're going to notice that the tiny houses of 2021, so I remember the biggest tiny house was about 7 meters long, 7.2 was a really good size. And then I remember seeing my first one that was 8.4. We were like, whoa, it's just absolutely huge. You could have a second bedroom almost with an 8.4 one. And now in 2026, we've got new 10-ton trailers. They've got 10, 11 meters long at least, and 3 meter wide ones, double story with a pod deck and everything else. And the reason why they've got big is because there's more and more families. So I saw a lady about 2 weeks ago, and she has, I believe, 5 children. It's herself and 5 children are moving into a beautiful 3 bedroom tiny house that she's paid really good money for, to be honest with you. They're not, they're not the cheapest things, tiny houses anymore. But that's how the market has changed quite dramatically. And I think families wanting to live in them has really boosted that. There was a period in 2022 when, because the legislation was pretty much, you can't stay in them, you can stay in them short term. It was actually easier for people who had acreage and large plots of land. They were buying them for Airbnb. And I know some people cringe, oh my God, Airbnb, it's the antichrist at the moment of the housing crisis. However, what that did is it had builders were able to build quite a few of them, and builders were able to, I'm going to use the word, they made them more sexy, they made them more bougie, because that was attractive for the Instagram, Airbnb thing. But in hindsight, that was quite a good thing, because it really pushed things out of the box, and people were going, wow, they're quite luxurious. And what we found is that people who are looking at living in a tiny house, if they're not from that original grassroots movement, whereby the reason you'd want to live tiny would be that you want to live more with nature, and you want to live with less stuff. That's the whole ethos of tiny, of tiny houses. However, what it did do is it had people that wouldn't have considered having a tiny house suddenly go, well, I could live in this small space. And if I'm going to live in a small space, I'm going to do it in the most luxurious format that I can. And
mm,
so it brought a lot more people to the marketplace, which has kept all these builders innovating and doing more and more and more builds.
mm. So Joyce asked the question, what's the definition of a tiny home then? Is it the size?
It's not, no. Good question, and one that we kind of have a lot of problems with, to be honest with you. When I talk about a tiny house, when I'm on stage at the expos, I really am thinking about a tiny house on wheels. And so a tiny house on wheels is usually defined by weight, which is 4.5 ton. As I just mentioned, we've got these new 10-ton trailers coming out, so they are getting bigger. But to be legally towed, they can only be so long, they can only be so high. So I think the height is either 4.3 or 4.6, kind of depends who you talk to and what state you're in. The width is 2.5 or 3 meters, because what they've managed to do is put 3 meter house on a 2.5 trailer. So legally, it's still a 2.5 trailer. So therefore, it can still be towed on the road. So it's just a few little changes. You might have to put like an oversized sticker on, and there might be times of which you can actually tow them. But a shipping container, which has been
Mm.
converted, would certainly be a tiny house. And some of the small modular builds could, they're tiny houses, but they're on the ground. The problem that we get into is that once they're on the ground, if you fix to the land, you're then a traditional house. You might
Hmm.
be a small traditional house, but you're not necessarily a tiny house that we're advocating change for. So what we're finding is as much as we include modulars and shipping containers and lots of different shapes and everything else, because we're trying to advocate for tiny houses, we like to try and stick to the type of tiny house that is having difficulty with legislation, and that's more the ones that are on wheels. The ones that can be fixed to the land, they can go through a traditional pathway of legislation. So I would hate to say tiny homes are only those ones that are on wheels, because that's not correct, really. But for sure, it's for advocacy purposes, we kind of stick to tiny houses on wheels, that's for sure.
And when you say on wheels, does that also mean tiny home or a shipping container that's been put onto stilts? Is that also, or is that attached to the land then?
If it's attached to the land, it becomes a traditional house. It's just a
Right. So
simple one.
stilts is attached to the land. Right.
Yeah, it's more about, if you attach to the land, but tiny houses
Stumps, I'm thinking.
I
Mm.
mean, I could get a shipping container on stilts and make that temporary. And it can be moved. So therefore, they might say it's a movable dwelling or transportable dwelling or something along those lines. And as far as the Australian Tiny House Association is concerned, that comes under the umbrella of a tiny house. But generally, tiny houses on wheels are sort of like the ones that get the most attention. Shipping containers are really popular. There's some really nice shipping container conversions that you can do. But of course, as far as legislators go, what they get worried about with a shipping container is that a shipping container might be a tiny house, but what if you get one, two, three of them and start doubling them up? Is it still then
Mm.
a tiny house? And so you kind of go into these waters of, oh, like where do we go? Where do we go with this? And it's a struggle with legislators as to what is a tiny house and what is something that's just being put together and is no longer a tiny house. So they're not necessarily defined by size alone. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, tiny houses on wheels are the ones that need the most help. And I think that they're the most useful. They can be easily moved, which gives you a flexible lifestyle. You don't have to own the land. You can rent land, which is super handy for a lot of people that can't afford land at the moment. So I think that they have a real purpose to providing a really fantastic housing topology, especially in the housing climate that we're in at the moment.
So you mentioned shipping containers. Um, and traditionally, I guess a lot of shipping containers were converted, but now are some of the builders building, when you say modular, they're building from scratch and just keeping to that size,
Um,
or are they still starting with a shipping container as their base?
no, a shipping container build and a modular build I would very much separate. So a modular build is built prefab in a factory, and it's
Mhm.
delivered as one unit. But more, I would say a modular at the moment that would be really popular. One, they can be wider. they're not stuck to that 2.4 or 3 meters that I mentioned earlier for
Mhm.
road use. So we see a lot of modulars that are 4 or 5 meters wide, and they might be 12, 15 meters long, round about
Mm.
that sort of size. So I think if you imagine a really nice, neat granny flat, that's the sort of size that a modular builders is, and the only difference is that it's not built on site. It's built in a factory and it's delivered as one whole piece. A shipping container is actually a freight container. They're exactly 2.4 meters wide, and I think they've got a certain height on them, which is under the 2.4 meter minimum that you're supposed to have for to be a house under the planning regulations. But
Mhm.
they have high top ones, which are that little bit taller. So they use the taller ones to turn them into, and sometimes they're just like 20 foot. You can get 20-foot shipping containers and 40-foot shipping containers, and either are really nice if they can be converted into a little studio or a little one bedroom with a bathroom. And as I mentioned before, they're super popular for having a couple of them pushed together and turning them into that slightly larger house. So if you can get away with that through the council, it's definitely a good one, but it's not an easy one to get through the council, might I add.
Now, I know you're particular with your builders and who you let into tiny homes and expos. How do you choose? What's your criteria? And Emma was asking, are there some builders who kind of come in under that umbrella and they can be a bit dodgy? How do you know?
Um, Dodgy, I don't come across very often. It depends what you mean by dodgy. If you mean dodgy by trying to pull a fast one and rip people off, I don't come across that often, but I'm going to come across a point of difference in a minute in regards to that. Dodgy, as in I've seen some really weird work. Yeah, we've come across a few of those. But right at the very start, when I remember the first one in 2022 that we did at Hawkesbury that you came to, Kelly, there was a new builder there who had put a great big house onto a trailer. That trailer was so heavy and so overweight, it was bowing in the middle. I mean, it was horrendous. And I had people from the, Australian Tiny House Association coming up to me going, "Oh my goodness, you're going to have to vet these people better. We can't have this on show and everything else." And I said, he just needs some education. And I went over and I picked him up. And over the other side of the expo, there was a guy that sold aluminium strong trailers. And I had the two of them have a conversation and he upped his game. So I kind of looked at it as collaborate. You'd be surprised. All those builders at the expo are generally in competition with each other. But when it comes to the expo, they all look after each other. And
Mm.
there was one guy that had a bit of an accident on the way to the expo, and a whole side of his house was just hanging off. And one of the more local builders said, "Look, I've got some of that material at my factory. I'll go and get it." And not only did he go and get it, he fixed it for him as well overnight. So when
Mm.
he came in the morning, it was all fixed up. So there's a lot of, I feel we've got to lift them and up their game. And I can give many examples of ones that have done that. The only type of tiny house that we don't allow at the expo, and I don't want to say that they're all dodgy, but because of stories of dodginess and stories of woe where people have put their life savings into buying things and it's gone horrendously wrong. And I've got a folder right here on my computer with hundreds of these sort of things that have gone wrong, and every single one of them have been involving the imported expandables. So for that
Mm.
reason, we don't necessarily have those. And look, some people have those imported expandables and they have a good story. I'm not saying they're all bad and they're all dodgy, but I've got way too many stories and things that are going through Office of Fair Trading, and terrible stories of people who have lost all of their money, that I just feel that to safeguard it somewhat, we've just done a carte blanche. Look, we can't have expandables at the expo at this point in time.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't know, that there's definitely been a couple of stories of builders that haven't done the right thing. I think there was a story back in 2020, somebody was taking deposits and not delivering houses. I think you get you can get that in any industry. I certainly don't feel that the tiny home industry has more than its fair share of that sort of thing.
Mm.
But we do check them to make sure they've got, we go and have a look at their website. Um, I'm a good stalker. I'll stalk them on Facebook, have a look at what they're doing. I've done plenty of that, and I like to see what kind of involvement they have with the community as a whole. So if I go onto Facebook pages, I'll give you an example. I'll go on a Facebook page, and this lady, bless her, she said she was building her own tiny house. I think she was asking something on the lines of like she wanted some advice on what color to paint the door, something as trivial as that. And then underneath that, you had all these builders who I didn't know. They're not ones from the expo going, or here's my website, and just putting their website. Nobody was helping her with what she wanted help with. It was just self-promotion. And
Mm.
I definitely take notice of things like that and think if all you want out of the industry is self-promote, gimme, 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 and you haven't got anything to give, well, they'll get the look from Phae that they don't like. So, so yeah, they definitely are not my favorite builders for sure. They know who they are.
Good on you. How does the setting up water and electricity and things, how does that work with a tiny home if you're renting land, and then does that cross over? When does it cross over then into a house and not a tiny home?
No, electricity and sewerage and water does not change the tiny home definition.
Mm-hmm.
It has caused some problems. Some councils feel that it does,
Mm.
but I can tell you that it doesn't. It's been through court, and so if any council thinks it does, they'll usually get a correction from me. It's all about whether you're temporarily attached to the land or permanently attached to the land. So if you
Mm-hmm.
want to plumb into normal sewerage, you can, provided you get a professional plumber to do it. And when the professional plumber does it, you ask that professional plumber to put in writing on his report or his bill even that he has connected it and he's done it properly, and that he can unconnect it within 24 hours. It's
Mm.
temporary. That's all you need. You'd walk into court or council, whatever, and say, there you go, there's my piece of paper that says, yes, I'm connected to the plumbing. But because he can disconnect it in less than 24, probably just in 2, 3 hours, it's therefore temporarily connected to the land. So you can plug into main sewerage. Of course, with tiny houses, especially if you're going to rent land, we do advise that you're going to have more options of land that you can rent if you're completely off grid, because
Mm-hmm.
people don't want to spend on that infrastructure, or they worry about bills. I can't, or maybe because if you're going to be on, say, if somebody's got some land, they might want you a bit further away from the main dwelling that they're living in. And so definitely if you are off grid, you're going to have way more options. Not saying that you have to be off grid to rent land. There's many people that get offered water and land and water and electricity. Sewerage, not so much. It's
Mm-hmm.
complicated because we've got to get the plumber in and everything. So composting toilets are, I would say, 80% of tiny houses are composting toilets, incinerating toilets. And we've got this new thing at the moment that I'm really excited about because I'm getting one. It's called a wormlet. I don't know
Mm.
if you saw that at the expo. It's like um, a bucket of worms, if you want. I'm going to put this really simply. I'm sure there's way more to it. And it's like a mini sewerage system that is portable. And it deals with your waste and also with your grey water as well. So it's a really simple system. The worms do what they do and deal with the matter, and then the water is filtered, and then your grey water needs to go into the ground, not over the ground. It needs to go into the ground, because Mother Nature cleans water best, as we all know. And what's fantastic about that system is that if you were for whatever reason going to move, you can grab that system and take your whole sewage system with you. So if you don't mind me swearing, it's like if you when you need to go, you can pack up and take your shit with you. So I really think that's a great idea.
Yes. And someone else had a question about that. I know my mum has a home with a bio, what would it be called? A sewage system that
Oh,
is
the biogas.
biogas.
I've never
Mm.
seen one of those in person. Yeah,
Mm.
they're that company I think is based, I believe, in Israel, biogas,
Mm.
and I thought that it would take off a bit over here. And I occasionally come across things online, but I don't know too much about them. I haven't seen them in person, but they look interesting. Have any of
I'm
you?
surprised they haven't showed it themselves off at the tiny homes.
I have emailed with them in Israel. That's how I know where they are.
Ah,
But
wow.
they don't have an Australian arm as far as I know.
Right. And so I love that all those solutions, all the other bits that come with tiny homes are also there at the tiny homes showing off their wares. You can kind of a one-stop shop and find everything you need. What uh, I want to go to the chat and make sure I'm getting everyone's questions in. I know you do these tiny homes back to back. You're in, like within 6 weeks, you're in the next state, or sometimes a month back to back. How do you do it? Honestly,
No idea. I'm exhausted. It is a lot. I do have a partner, as you know. Lance he does all the site management side of it, and sets it all up and positions everybody and makes sure that there's power there and everything along those lines. But it is literally a two-man team. And I sometimes sit here and shake my head. I don't know how we're doing it. There's a lot to it, trying to do these events
yes,
behind the scenes. We have to do applications that they're books worth of applications that we have to do for an event, because government being government, they doing an event, it makes no difference if you've just got a few hundred people coming or if you're putting on a Michael Jackson concert and there's thousands of people coming. It's all the same paperwork that you have to do.
yeah,
And so there's a lot behind the scenes, and it certainly keeps two people really, really busy. But I feel that we wanted to get across Australia and really champion the industry and really boost the idea that people can do it. I think what the expos do is they give people. I have a lot of speakers on stage who live in tiny houses. And when you talk to people who are doing it, and you get an idea that there's all these builders, as I just said, there's 300 builders here. If they're all building houses, they're going somewhere.
mm,
And I can tell you now, there's been less than 4 court cases where there's been controversy. By the way, out of those 4, just about all 4, the tiny homeowners won.
yeah, wow,
Also difficult. How are there thousands of people living in them? The majority of people live peacefully and easily in a tiny house. What you hear about is the controversial ones where it doesn't go so much to plan. Just keep that in mind. And I feel that when we do an expo and they listen to people who are living full time in a tiny house, it gives people confidence.
yeah,
And it just makes them think. I remember last year at the Sydney one, we were doing a Q&A, and at the end we were saying, has anyone got any questions? And no one's putting up their hands. And so we said, okay, well, we'll just finish up there. And then this lady just put her hand up, and I said, oh, what question have you got? She goes, I haven't got any question at all. She said, I don't even know what I'm doing here. And I'm like, excuse me. And she said that she's been living and renting, and I know she works at the Sydney airport. And she said she just saw an ad to go to this expo, and she thought, oh, I don't know why, but I feel like going. She said, I just saw the ad and thought I might go. She said she spent the whole day, and she'd spent the last hour in the speaker hall sitting with her calculator, working out how much rent she was paying and asking herself why is she living like this? And she said, so next, I haven't got a question. She said, but next year I'll be coming back and I'm going to get myself a tiny house. I'm going to change my life.
amazing.
And I think that's a really, like, she had no idea anything. I don't think she'd even seen a tiny house before she literally arrived there. And it all made sense to her. I love that, because not only did she see, yeah, okay, the tiny houses are pretty or bougie or whatever you want to call them, but she'd obviously spoken to the toilet people, the solar people, and she'd spoken to a lady who told her how to rent land. And so that's all valuable information. I've always said that the expo has become an educational expo over and over and above anything else. I think anybody that goes there and just looks around the houses and goes home is a travesty, because if the information is what it's about, and being inspired and thinking a little bit differently. Too many people arrive at the expo with that real traditional mindset. I need to buy land and have an asset. That's a traditional mindset. And there's nothing wrong with those people. It's bopped into our heads from a very young age from our parents, because that's how they've lived. Buy a house, it's an asset, and it will increase and sell the asset, or buy 10 houses. Monopoly, it's all the same. But tiny houses is about living the way you want to live,
Mm.
and living with less stuff, and living more connected to nature. And I think it really brings out certain things in people's personalities. And most of all, it's quite a stressful journey getting a tiny house. It actually is. I'm doing it at the moment, and even I'm finding it a bit stressful, picking the designs and everything else, and where are you going to put it, and the toilet, and the electricity, and how the water's going to work, and everything else. There's a lot to think about. But there comes a point, and I speak to people that do this all the time, and when they move into that tiny house, I call it just the exhale. Yeah, there's a time where they sit in there and they own that house. No one's going to take it from them. Even if they got moved on, so what? It's on wheels most of the time. You just cart it up the road. The next door neighbor might have you. No one needs to die just because you've got to move that tiny house, but it's your tiny house. You've got no mortgage on it, and it's you, and you can go home and be safe and secure in that tiny house that you've got all to yourself. And I think that that's a real moment that people have when they move into their tiny houses and they realize I've done it.
Is it Brioni who pairs up people with land?
Hmm.
And I used to get her email where if you had some land and someone was looking for a tiny home, then it's like a matchmaking.
Yeah, we call it the Tinder of tiny houses. She finds
Yeah.
people that have got land that are willing to host a tiny home owner on it, and you've got people with tiny houses that are looking for land. That sounds scary to most people because, as I mentioned before, of our traditional mindset. But you'd be interested to know, I was speaking to one builder the other day, and he said to me that 80% of his customers now his customers, he has really high-end tiny houses. He has some of the most expensive tiny houses. One's over $200,000.
Wow.
And the majority of them buy his houses without land.
Okay.
And while he's building it, they then go off. It's not like they've even secured land before they bought that tiny house. It's whilst he's building it that people start looking for land, because that's the best time to look for land, while you're building it, because there's a matter of urgency. We found people that start looking for land first before they build the house. There's they have trouble trying to find it. Whereas somebody who's built a house and it's ready next week, they've suddenly got 7 offers of land. It's an unusual phenomenon. So we
Mm.
say it's almost a case of build and they will come. What is it, like the Field of Dreams with Kevin
Yes.
Costner?
Probably because you have a date, right? It's like, okay, I know when you can move, and so you have an offer that you can
I
talk
think I
to.
think your whole personality comes into it as well, and you have this
Mm.
purpose and commitment. And if somebody's going to rent you their land, they're looking for that purpose and that commitment. So suddenly you become a real thing. Plus you can show them a picture of your house, and most people who have got land go, well, that's beautiful. I'd love to have that in my back garden or on my acreage. So
Yeah.
so yeah, a lot of people. And originally when Bryony started back in, I think she was about 2021 as well, people that were renting land was relatively rare. Rare now, not rare at all. People that have got big houses are having as much trouble with the cost of living as anyone else. You know, their rates have gone up, their costs have gone up. They've got maintenance on those big properties, and they're often quite willing to not only rent out for money, but also in exchange for work. You know, as people age, like I'm living on Anchorage here, and my friends who bought it are in their 60s. And sometimes I see them out there weeding and mowing and everything else. There's going to come a stage where they're going to find that hard to do. And I said to them, when that happens, see if you can barter some mowing time for somebody who can have a tiny house up on the hill over, you know, I've pointed out where they could do that. So a lot of people find that's a really good arrangement. Another good arrangement that I come across relatively often is I have concerned adult children who are concerned about their aging parents who have stayed in the estate, if you like, you know, a big house that they're struggling to maintain. And so they might say, well, look, we'll put somebody with a tiny house, but they just want somebody on the property. So if something happened to mum or dad, there was a fall or something, there's somebody there. Um, and that's enough. They don't ask for payment. I'm not saying that that's abundant, but it's certainly possible for people who are worried about, you know, whether they can afford to pay land rental. Otherwise, land rental can be anything from $100 a week to $300 a week. It really depends on where and what facilities and whether it's got a big view and a swimming pool or whatever.
So what would be the lower end range of a tiny home if you're starting out?
The tiny home, the cost of the tiny home.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, it can be really, really, really low if you DIY. I reckon that you would be able to DIY at the moment. Look, it'd be pretty small, but I reckon $40,000 would get you something. And I would say $80,000 would get you something quite good. $100,000 and you've got someone to build it for you. 120 to 150 sweet spot. You're going to get a nice house with everything that you need and a few luxuries in there. And then these bigger ones, as they're getting bigger into the 9 meters and 3 meters wide, and you know, in a fancy light bulb or whatever it is that you want in it, they can go over 200,000 very quickly and very easily. And that would come down to your taste and your personal preferences.
Yeah.
If you want gold taps, then that's what you want, and you're going to pay for them. But you can still build your own. The saddest thing about the DIY home building is you won't get insurance. That's for sure. And they would possibly be more difficult to get through council if that was the way you needed to go. But if, like most people, you were just going to go off the radar and just set it up and make sure your neighbours don't complain, then it needn't be a big problem.
I want to just check in the chat. Did anyone have any questions? I saw Emma's and Joyce. Did your questions get answered, or do you want to come off mute and ask them?
What should be some key considerations to establish if a tiny home is the right fit for you? What would be some key considerations to establish if a tiny home is the right fit for you? Okay.
Maybe if you can live with less stuff, that's a
yeah. I mean, if we're just talking about size, yeah. I can't begin to tell you how easy that side of it is. That's the bit everyone focuses on. Oh, I couldn't live in anything that small. Yes, you can. I can tell you. You certainly can. So I'm a single parent and I've always wanted a nice big house. And during COVID, I was moving and I'd signed a lease on a new place and I was staying at a friend's in between. And then COVID came in and I lost that new place and I had nowhere to go at all. And a friend who I kind of knew had mentioned that she had I think it was she called it a studio, and I was like desperate because I didn't have anywhere to go. My children at this stage are 16 and 18 years old, so they're adult-sized children. This studio measured 6 meters by 3 meters. 6 meters by 3 meters. Just have a look around your room and imagine that was the bedroom, the kitchen, and the lounge room. There was another place where you went there with a shared bathroom. Okay, so I had a shared bathroom. So I thought, oh God, I can stay here for a week or so until I find something out. 4 years I lived there. 4 years, happy as anything. You don't realize how small you can go and how much less stuff you can have until you've done it. And when you have done it, you just go, what on earth was I stressing about? It's easy. What
Mm.
you do need at the moment is you need a bit of a constitution to be a bit brave in light of the legislation. I do feel that if you're a bit of a wallflower and want to do everything in life the right way through council, you've got to be a slight bit of a, I'm not going to say a rebel because you're not going, it's not illegal. This is just a case of councils haven't got an assessment pathway. I deal with this all the time. I speak to councils all the time. I speak to state government all the time. The argument is not, are we allowed tiny houses? The argument isn't, should we be allowed to live in tiny houses? The argument is, excuse me, government, there's this new kind of house out here and we don't have an assessment pathway. You have a problem. We don't.
Mm.
You have a problem. If this, when these cases get to court, what do you think the judge says? Oh, you're living in a tiny house, you're not allowed to. God, no. They turn to the council and go, where's the assessment pathway? So councils are worried about obvious things and things that they should be worried about. This is not about having a bash on councils. You know, they should be worried about sewerage floating down the street. They should be worried about people setting up in dangerous places. They should be worried about fire, flood, and environmental issues. And the biggest thing, which I haven't mentioned yet, but it's a massive subject, but your neighbours.
Hmm.
Right now in Australia, your chances of living in a tiny house are very much dictated by how your neighbour feels about it. If your neighbours are happy about it, knock yourself out and do it. You won't have any problems at all. Council will only act if there's a neighbour complaint. Because
Right.
tiny houses aren't illegal or not allowed or anything. They just don't have an assessment pathway yet. And so in WA, we have a state 2-year rule. In New South Wales, we have New South Wales is actually really quite simple. They've got great little grey areas in their rules. It's not too hard at all. You can have a tiny home in your backyard. Again, don't upset your neighbours. Don't mess with the environment. That's pretty much all you need to know. But they have recently had Shell Harbour have changed the LEP, the Land and Environment Planning, and again, it's got a 2-year limit on it. But the 2-year limit does not mean that you get to park your tiny house for 2 years and after 2 years, boop, you're off. You get evicted and a boot up your bum. Not at all. The 2 years is for two reasons. One, there's current legislation that fits with 2 years. And the second part of that is that the council want data and they need to kind of look at what's going to happen. They're like, what's going to happen? Are people going to set up trailer parks everywhere and they panic? What's everyone going to do with their sewerage? What's going to happen? So if they do a 2-year limit, at least they've got a bit of a get out of jail free card. And in some cases, that's going to be necessary. In WA, where there's a 2-year limit, I can give you at least 2 examples of people that are not going to be living in their houses longer than 2 years because they're not doing the right thing. One guy's put three in
Mm.
his backyards and rented it out to nine builders. It's slumlord stuff. So that's not the idea of it. So he'll only be getting his 2 years and he'll be told to move on. And another one's upsetting his neighbour. He's only going to get 2 years and be asked to move on. But in general, councils aren't looking to evict people and make people's lives a misery for no reason. But your neighbours might be. Watch the neighbours. They are 100% the problem of tiny houses is the people living next door,
The neighbour.
unfortunately, or up the road.
That is so true. So this is why at My Self-Reliance we're all about loving on your neighbours. Get them on side even
There's
before
a
you put your
question
house
here
there.
about renting land as blank blocks or sharing on blocks with established houses. We would recommend, some people rent blank vacant land, but I personally would not recommend that because everything that I just said before about, the neighbours and everything else and council won't act kind of goes out the window when you put a tiny house on a vacant block. And that's literally because to put a house or any dwelling, whether it be a tiny house or a traditional house on a vacant block of land, you have to do what's called the DA, the development application. The development application is about use of the land. So a vacant block hasn't been given permission to be residential use. So if you put a tiny house on it, you may find you'll have problems with the council, whether a neighbour complains or not. So
Mm.
I think on vacant land, it is a little bit more complicated. We tell people that if they own vacant land and they want a tiny house, they're actually better off going the modular route and having something that's fixed to the ground, because then they can just do a traditional DA and get that land use sorted out. If you're going to rent land, I would suggest that you rent land as a secondary dwelling on someone's acreage or a very big back garden, and do it like that. It's just honestly, it's just a lot easier. It's as simple as
Mhm.
that. You can do it the other way, but it's more complicated and higher risk. So if you want a low risk setting, I would look at finding somebody that's got a main house. But here's a tip that no one thinks about, because a lot of people want to buy land, and they go, oh, but we want to buy a vacant lot. We don't want to, and I just go, no problem at all. Just try and find yourself a house that is literally fallen down. I don't care if it's been burnt to the ground, because that's had a DA put on it.
Yeah.
And when you put your tiny house on there, you can still be considered a secondary dwelling. So,
Mm.
so we just tell people to buy absolutely derelict houses. They'll get it for land value, but that's had a DA, and the land use issue has been sorted out.
That's a good tip.
Yeah.
Do your builders go from state to state, or when you go to different states, they're all kind of different builders wherever you go, or houses, or like storeholders, vendors?
I would say about 75 to 80% are more local to the state. And then there's a set of builders that come to every single one. So the
Mm.
lovely Rick from Havenwood, he comes to every single Tiny Home Expo. Wheelie Rooms, who do really fabulous budget versions of tiny houses, love those guys. Um, they come to every single expo. So there's a few builders, and some of the like at the moment, Worm Smart are coming to every single expo. That was a little wormlet sewerage thing that I mentioned to you before. So
Yes.
some of them are every single one, and but not all of them for sure. We don't sort of like do a carnival thing where the same ones come all the way around with us. They're usually Victorian builders, New South Wales builders, or Queensland builders. And it's one of the reasons why we have difficulty with doing expos in Tasmania, South Australia, and in Perth, because they've got a very low rate of local builders. So for those expos, we have to try and get the builders that are in other states to travel to them. And
Mm.
that's expensive. We've got high fuel prices, guys. And it's pretty expensive to tow houses around the country, to say the least.
And so last question from me, but what is it that my self-reliance brings to the tiny homes that is the reason you want us there, like
Oh,
having us there?
absolutely. So from the very start, I've always wanted to have people are re-looking at the way they live their lives, as I said right at the very beginning, and the subjects that you cover, and the ethos that you're all about is exactly what people are looking for. They're not just looking for tiny houses; they're looking for a whole lifestyle change, and people are interested in fending for themselves. Look around you at this world. Why wouldn't you be?
Mm.
And when I very first did the very first Tiny Home Expo, it was in COVID, and the first one got slightly postponed. Had it not been postponed, my guest speaker at that one was actually Jeff Lawton, who does
Huh.
permaculture. And yeah,
Yes.
I was a bit of a fan, and I managed to track him down, but he couldn't come after we postponed. He was going to, at the time, he was doing all the reseeding in Jordan, I think it was. Anyway, he left the country. And so I've always thought, permaculture, having your own chickens, and kind of like homesteading, and stuff like that. People are people are super interested in that sort of stuff. I mentioned that I'm living on my friend's acreage at the moment. He sold his business, and I think he's going to go full prepping. He's got all sorts of wild ideas at the moment because he's got out of the rat race and he's re-looking at how he's living. And he's got, I think, about 40 chickens now. He started with just one. He's gone wild with the chickens. Lordy knows what he's doing up there. Because he lives next door. My friend that owns the property I'm on. So absolutely, I think that people are looking for guidance, and what they want is they want to meet people who are already doing these sort of things, so that it demystifies it all. You don't have to be, sort of like covered in dirt and in homemade clothes just because you follow practices of permaculture and chickens and looking after yourself. But the whole idea that you can be self-reliant is a real dream of most people.
Mm. I found that when we were in Sydney and people came to the pavilion we're in and said, "Ah, I didn't know you were going to be here, but this is exactly what we were looking for. The community that comes with the home. Yeah, it's a perfect match."
And that's what people are looking for. They're looking for community, whether they know it or not. And I think that's another thing that attracts them to tiny homes, is that they feel that that there's definitely the dream of tiny home villages.
Yeah.
Again, because of legislation, extraordinarily hard to do, but it's coming. WA got its first one approved in Australia. So that's in the Shire of Capel. I think I might have pronounced that wrong. Capel in WA. And that'll be a tiny home village,
Wow.
exactly as you imagine it. Beautiful tiny home owners taking their tiny homes for long term living. Um, so I do feel that that's on its way. I just say to people, look, bear with us. Where I live, there's a balcony just to my right here. If I was to take a stone and throw it, I'd probably hit a tiny home village under the radar.
Okay.
They don't want anyone. They won't tell you where they are. They're not going to pop up on Facebook. But there's plenty of them all around me, and there's probably plenty of them around you as well. They're just very quiet at the moment because if that came to the attention of council, they would see that as a caravan park.
Yes. And I think AI has made tiny homes look very attractive on Facebook and whatnot. There's a lot of little videos that you can watch that look like a tiny home village. And I don't think that's a real thing if people knew. But it looks gorgeous on AI
Okay,
when
it
they
does
do it up.
become a real thing because I feel you know a lot, Kelly, about community and communities, human beings need community. You know that, okay?
Yeah.
And we're social people. However, I spoke to a psychologist who said that's quite true. But also another side of humans is that they need to go out the door and socialize. They need to communicate and they need to connect with people. But at
Mm.
night, they want to go home, sit in their own house, preferably on their own or with their other half, with their family is okay. And they want to cook like they want. They want to take their clothes off, fart if they want to, take their bra off. And we're not meant to live together. So
Mm.
apparently co-sharing boarding house and stuff like that, that's apparently can be quite detrimental for some people's health. I'm sure some people love it, but that can
Yeah.
be detrimental. But the idea of a tiny home village is exactly how we're meant to live. And a
Yeah.
psychologist told me that.
Yes. Perfect. Well, that is a beautiful way to wrap up. Let's just check and see if there's anyone in the house has any other questions. Now, whilst we're doing that, let's tell everyone what they can expect at the Tiny Homes Brisbane, because this is your showcase expo of them all. What do you want people to get excited about it?
You'll definitely feel it's a lovely layout. It's all on grass. It's a lovely layout, and it's one where we have probably more exhibitors, so it's quite buzzy behind the scenes. It's the I must say we've never held it in August when it's this cold. It's a bit chilly up here, people. For us, it is anyway. So normally we have this at the very end of September, maybe the first week of October, and it's a little bit warmer. But anyway, hopefully they're still happy to network behind the scenes, because I like that side of the expo where all the exhibitors and that, network together. And the people, some people will be coming to the Brisbane Expo for their sixth time. People come back every single year. They want to, they want to see more houses, or they want to come to the speakers or whatever. And they're very laid back here, very, very laid back. So in all other states, like we're going to do the council talk and it'll just be full. And in Queensland, it's like, oh, who cares? And they will just like, I'll just go and have a look at tiny houses and I don't need to listen to the council talk. So they're particularly laid back in Queensland. We believe that there's more people living in tiny houses in Queensland than any other state in Australia. Particularly where I live, we estimate that there might be more tiny houses in the Sunshine Coast area than any other LGA in Australia. So it's quite celebrated here. So I think you'll feel that kind of excitement that way around.
Well, we had people telling us they were coming back the second day in a row. So, they take advantage of the whole weekend, not just one day.
Yeah, I mean the expos aren't huge. Sydney wasn't huge. It's not like you're gonna need to spend days and days just to see the amount of houses there. But with so many talks and so much information that's on, I think it's a great idea for people to come in and maybe spend one day going around the houses and looking at all the products, but then another day in your speaker hall or my speaker hall and learn something, because that's probably where the value of the ticket is. It's in the knowledge that you guys are giving and the knowledge that my speaker hall gives out. It's I could give you so many stories. People's lives have been changed in those speaker halls, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, because the penny drops that that this I don't having a home and being able to look after yourself is a primal need. And you've got two things here at this expo that meets that primal need. It can make people feel quite whole, to say the least. They could have quite a life-changing experience. And I've seen it happen.
Yeah, beautiful. Absolutely. I have Debbie with her hand up. Debbie, you want to ask a question?
Oops, sorry, just trying to unmute myself. Thank you, Phae. That was brilliant. That was really, really informative.
Thank you.
And what you said about the people that come back 2 days in a row, that was me. I went for the first day and checked out all the houses, but the second day we spent in the hall and just learnt so much with Kelli and everybody else that was in there.
That's brilliant.
And it was you really needed 2 days to do that. But the thing is, I used to work for one of those portable home builders.
Yeah.
And he was actually at your expo.
Mm-hmm.
They're pop-up things. They're like little, they can pop up in a few hours. So pretty much they come as a flat pack and just push the side walls out, and takes a few blokes to do it. But then they transport them first and then build them on site. But the problem with them is they come from China and they leak.
Yes, yeah, the Chinese ones. So
yeah, they're cheap enough. Like, you can pick them up for $20,000-$30,000 and more, and they can be okay. Like you can get a 3-bedroom one.
Yeah.
But they're not good quality. Like they're not really designed to last more than 10, 15 years before they start rusting and leaking and everything else. I'm not trying to put them down. If you want cheap housing short term, they're great. But if you see yourself in it for more than that, you're better off to get somebody to spec build it.
Yeah, so what you're talking about there is an imported expandable unit.
That's right, yep.
Those are actually banned from the expo. What you saw at the expo would be somebody that, I know somebody that does sell those also, but he's not allowed to bring them to the expo. He's only allowed to bring what is called the Juliet series, which is
that's right. Yes, know them well. I used to sell them. I know
exactly what you're talking about, which is a modular version. He's not allowed to bring expandables. He's not allowed to promote expandables at the expo. It's their rules. Because I agree with you. I can't just blanket ban anything just because it comes from China.
I know.
I'll do it that way around, but I certainly have told Frank his name is. And
Frank,
Frank,
that's right.
he's a super respectful guy.
Oh, he's lovely. He's a really nice fellow.
and
Yeah.
and he abides by my rules that he is not to have expandables at the show because
Yeah.
all those things that you just mentioned there, they do indeed leak.
Yeah.
They do have a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And so no, they're not allowed there.
Yeah, that's good because if people don't know that though, it's easy to get caught up in the dollar value and not actually look at the product that you're getting.
Well, there's a couple of people that do expandables that have gone all the way. So, by the way, to get these expandables to Australian standards, you would need to send a certifier to China,
Yeah.
an electrician to China, and a plumber to China, and you
That's
have
right.
six
Yeah.
things signed off before they put
Yep.
the cladding on, etc.
Yeah.
There are about 3 companies in Australia that have done exactly that,
Yeah.
and they have what's called a compliant expandable model. I still
Yeah.
can't allow them to come to the expo because I've explained to them that if they're at the expo, their units are about 4 times the price of the cheap Chinese ones that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And what happens is people come to the expo, they see them there, and when they get home, they're online and they go, oh, I saw those at the expo, they must be really good. And they will buy something online off of some, from some usually dodgy,
Yeah.
because they're not builders.
Well,
They're
my point
importers.
is if you don't,
they're just on the phone to Alibaba. That's as much as they do. So,
oh, look, Frank imports them, and we've had big facilities around there in Mulgrave where he stores everything, but they've got an on-site village there now in Mulgrave as well. But the thing is, shouldn't we be promoting Australian-made products over the imported stuff? To me, that's far more important.
Mostly we do. I certainly support them and I talk about this at length, but what I can't do is just ban them just because they're from China. And there's some proof. So the expandables for sure, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I ban everything from China. There are people that are cheap, a cheap house like that will suffice, even if it's for short term.
Oh, absolutely.
Otherwise, every house there would be over 100,000, and I'd have saying there's nothing in my price range. I think as long as the builder is being honest with what he's selling, then it's not for me to say that cheap versions can't be there. There's cheap versions there, but they are vetted, and you can ask Frank. He's under very strict instructions over what.
I worked with him. I know. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. He's been very respectful towards those instructions of what he is trying to do. There's another one called Fadi does those are imported luxury pods, and again he had to set up an Australian warranty and guarantee to be able to get into the expos. Which he did because he's a reputable person. So I swear on my absolute life, I don't think I've had a day, not one day in 5 years where I have not had a phone call from an imported expandable builder, as they call themselves, asking me to come in the expo, and I have a cut and paste rejection every single day.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Without an application. That's how much we turn away.
I know.
Thanks for your question,
that's
Deb.
good to know, because if other people are not aware of it, you need to be aware of it, because there's houses and then there's just cheap junk.
Yeah.
But as you say, I think my mum had probably bought one of those, and yet she's not going to live in it more than 10 years. It's only there for a short term, and then
that's fine.
Yeah,
if that's what you want to do with it.
Yeah. And I think in the speaker hall, it's difficult for us to carte blanche, just stand up there and say, they're all junk, because like I said, there's 3 companies that actually do quite well. We word it. We don't want to get sued.
Oh, Frank's doing very well. Don't you worry.
Okay. Well, is there any other questions before we wrap up? I just want to say thank you so much, Phae, for having us. And from our part, we're very excited to have some really great speakers on board, and some very different topics than what we had in Sydney.
Look at your list. It's looking really good. It looks great. I'm looking forward to those.
Yes. Yeah. So I want everyone to go along and get their tickets to the Tiny Homes Brisbane. If you haven't already, you can use the promo code capital MSR promo. That is the promo code, PRMO. Did I spell that right? Okay, so PROMO. And then after that, you're off to Coffs Harbour in September.
Yes. Coffs Harbour will be a relatively small one, but yeah, it'll be going in the 18th to 20th of September. And then we actually go from there to Bendigo in Victoria, at the Bendigo Showgrounds. So we've already done one in Victoria this year. That was at Mornington. And so this is our second one for Victoria. And then we go to WA, and then it's the end of the year and I can stop.
Wow. And when does it start all over again?
Next year's got a bit of an exciting start to the year where we'll have our first Tasmanian one. It's going to be really interesting. So we're just organising the dates for the last weekend of February. Will be Tasmania.
Oh my goodness.
Kicking off 2027.
Wow.
Much awaited over in Tasmania. So, and that's news that only you guys are getting, because it was only decided on yesterday when I spoke to the minister. That the minister actually called me and asked me to take the expo there.
Bless.
I know.
Wow.
That's new information as of yesterday. No one knows it yet. So
amazing. Congratulations. Yeah. That's very, very exciting.
But it gives you confidence when ministers are asking for it to be there. The reason why she wants it to be in Tasmania, she's going to hold a summit and invite legislators and councils and stuff to that summit so they can see tiny houses for themselves, see that they're well made, and start looking at changing legislation for Tasmania. But which is great, because if you change it in Tasmania, other states look at it. It means that it's becoming a more acceptable form of housing, long-term housing, not temporary caravans, which is what they're classified as at the moment.
Well, Emma just asked me, Kelli, are we going to go to Tassie? And really, for us, it's up to our hubs when people, get on board with my self-reliance and want us to come to a state. We'd love to follow you around, Phae, and as many tiny homes as we can do with you, we'd love to. And that's up to our members as well to get things happening in their area, and then give us the push to come.
Tasmania would be a wonderful place for you to go to. I think there's a really high interest in off-grid there. I think for certain Tasmania would be, what a fantastic environment that would be to do my self-reliance event. I think that'd be great for sure. Yeah. So if you can come, you're more than welcome.
Bless. That's awesome. Awesome. Well, it's always great fun to work with you, Phae, and you're just an amazing person. I just am astounded at how you're doing the legislative work behind the scenes, as well as doing all of the expos that you do and all the people that you have to liaise with. I know what it's like running an event, and it's a huge undertaking. And then you put out the amazing magazine as well. Lance is doing a lot of that work, but it's just top notch. So congratulations to you. You do beautiful work. And if you haven't been to a Tiny Homes Expo, then maybe now after listening to this, you're keen and motivated to get to one. So
thanks so much, guys.
Yeah. Well, join us again next Tuesday when it's our members meeting. And in our members meeting next week, we're going to talk about our Sydney event, and I want to get all of your input for what you want to see happen. We're actually going to format it with workshops that you can rotate around, maybe 4 or 5 workshops that you can spend 25 minutes at each workshop, and then we'll finish off the day with a dinner and a bun dance. But I want to hear from you all of our members, the kinds of topics that you want to learn about in our workshops. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. So thanks again, Phae, and we will chat. As we get closer to the Brisbane, you and I just so appreciate you so much.
I'll be madly emailing you.
And now, if you want to be a speaker or be a stall holder, at any one of the expos around Australia as we get prepared, and the next one actually in the Coffs Harbour one. I've got some brilliant people who want to speak there. But if you're listening to this, maybe you're listening to the recording and you're like, oh, but I would really love to have a spot, then do reach out to me, and let's make your dreams come true too. So, all right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.